5 Truths About Antidepressants from People Who Take Them. There's a spin class I like here in New York City, and the instructor happens to have diabetes. Periodically in the middle of class, sometimes barely even slowing her pedaling feet, he'll check her blood sugar with a quick prick of her fingertip. Occasionally she'll explain herself before or after class. Other times, no explanation necessary. I'm sure others like me who have worked out with her more than a few times hardly notice any more. Therapists and doctors and writers like to draw an analogy between the constant vigilance required of people with diabetes and that of people with depression. A person might need to be on insulin for the rest of her life, and there's no shame in that. Depression, too, the thinking goes, can require lifelong treatment. Should our perception of that medication be any different? It's not a perfect analogy. We now know that depression is perhaps infinitely more complicated than the comparatively well-understood fix for type 1 diabetes of replacing missing insulin. But it still makes the point so clear it nearly punches you in the stomach. We wouldn't judge someone for treating a physical illness with medication, so why do we judge someone for doing the same for a mental illness? Diagnosing depression can be just as challenging as treating it. Do you experience any of these 9 surprising depression symptoms? I'm confident we're slowly moving away from this stigma, but we're not quite there yet. Whether it's because a person on antidepressants doesn't necessarily look sick or because we simply don't understand the benefits antidepressants have to offer, it's obvious we need more honest discussion of these meds and whom they work for and how. Considering the most recent data available suggests 11% of Americans over the age of 12 take an antidepressant, and that was in 2008. You owe them a little more compassion and understanding. In an attempt to help make things clearer and help us all be even just a little more accepting, here are a few things only people taking antidepressants truly understand. Depression is thought to be a noxious combination of genetic, environmental, and psychological factors that leads to profound feelings of sadness, hopelessness, pessimism, irritability, and fatigue, among many other possible symptoms. Antidepressants, the medications most commonly used to treat depression, affect a number of brain chemicals called neurotransmitters, which are thought to be involved in regulating our mood. While meds can make a drastic, sometimes life-saving improvement in how a person is feeling, antidepressants don't always mean the end of bad days or even med days, for that matter. Freelance writer Lynn Shattuck, 41, likens antidepressants to her contacts. "I'm super nearsighted. I need contact lenses to see," she says. Antidepressants aren't a happy pill. They just clear the fog for me. They help clear my vision and enable me to be able to see a little more. She's been on and off meds to help manage depression and anxiety for 2 decades. "My antidepressants are just one tool in my toolbox," she says. "I don't think any one thing for someone with depression is necessarily the answer." For Rob O'Hare, 34, an actor, comedian, and web producer who also happens to be my dear friend, antidepressants haven't made negative thoughts vanish, but they've helped speed them along. "Without medication, I might feel devastated," he says, "but with medication, I won't feel awful, and then the feelings will pass, and that's actually a drastic improvement." He was first diagnosed with depression in 2003, and while he recognizes that he still harbors negative thinking patterns, they have a chance to get better now with medication. It can be tempting to take antidepressants for a month or 2, feel like you've improved leaps and bounds, and figure you no longer need meds, says psychiatrist Michelle Tricamo, M.D., an assistant professor of psychiatry at Weill Cornell Medical College in New York. "That's not something we want to see," she cautions. "Just like you want someone to finish the whole course of antibiotics to prevent relapse, we don't want anyone to prematurely discontinue antidepressants, either. Typically," says Tricamo, "your doc will want you to be relatively symptom-free for about a year before you talk about stopping the meds to make sure the changes in how you're feeling are going to stick. What's even more important than how long you've been on antidepressants is that you don't try to go off them alone. A doctor can help you expertly taper your dose to wean you off with as few withdrawal effects as possible. We'll get to more on withdrawal later. After that weaning period, some people might carry on drug-free. Antidepressants can function like that ever-elusive perfect face wash that clears up your acne after a few weeks and you're set, says Rob. But for someone like me, depression is chronic, he says. I just have to manage it. Lynn says she was constantly establishing timelines in her head for when she'd be able to ditch antidepressants. It took years for her to come to terms with the fact that she might take them for the rest of her life. I believe this is part of my genetic makeup and something I need, she says. Her attitude is key in understanding long-term antidepressant use. People who benefit from the meds are taking them because they still provide those benefits. There's no high, and there are no cravings, says Tricamo. Antidepressants can cause withdrawal, which is probably where this misconception came from, she says, but it in no way means you can't stop using them. There are critics out there who say antidepressants and heck, countless other meds are simply overprescribed. But the process of beginning antidepressants doesn't start with some haphazardly written prescription. Docs frequently recommend therapy first, says Tricamo, which can result in significant improvements for many people with mild to moderate depression. When she's considering who might benefit from meds, Tricamo evaluates how much depression interferes with a person's daily life. If adults are unable to get to their jobs or leave their homes or can't support themselves, these might be times to use a medication, she says. Some people still have hang-ups about starting meds, even if therapy hasn't helped. The biggest internal battle was the idea that I should be able to feel better by myself, says Lynn. If I just did enough therapy or herbs or whatever, I could treat myself naturally. Such defeating self-talk, she says, is a non-starter because depression is, in and of itself, a distorted way of thinking, she says. It makes it really, really challenging to get yourself out of that on your own. We wouldn't suggest that a person with a broken leg should simply pull herself up by her bootstraps. Tricamo emphasizes the importance of working through these concerns and making the decision to try antidepressants a collaborative one. They're the ones taking the medication, after all, she says of her patients. You can't force them, and since you're not there to give it to them every day, you might not even know if they're taking it. Thoroughly explaining the risks and benefits can help a person understand why meds are important and how they might help. If you don't get them to buy into treatment, treatment is going to fail, she says. Anyone who has seen one of those horribly clicky staring out a window while it's raining TV commercials for antidepressants knows that the accompanying long list of potential side effects is equally horrible. Many of them, like weight gain, insomnia, nausea, low libido, delayed or vanished orgasm, and diarrhea, to name just a few, sound entirely unpleasant. Certain meds come to have a reputation for one side effect or another, but there's no real way of knowing what you might feel when you start one or how long the side effects will last. Nausea, headaches, or a jittery feeling usually vanish within the first couple of weeks, says Tricamo, but weight gain or a dampened sex drive might be harder to cope with. Unfortunately, it's something we can't really predict. Side effects aren't based on the dose of the med or really anything else measurable or adjustable, she says, although they are likely to be worsened by drugs or alcohol. While the unpredictability is certainly frustrating, it shouldn't be prohibitive. We can switch antidepressants, and we usually do find one that isn't so harmful in these ways, she says. It's kind of a guessing game, says Rob. He ended up in the emergency room after what was likely an allergic reaction to Lexapro when he first tried it in 2003. He's since tried a handful of others with varying rates of success. Cymbalta and Wellbutrin both made his depressive symptoms worse, he says. Effexor made him feel something he can only explain as medicated. He gained weight on Remeron, but describes the experience as feeling like his body was no longer his own. He's currently feeling some improvements on Prozac and is about to visit his psychiatrist for the first time in a month. He's stayed away from any antidepressants thought to mess with libido. He guesses everyone has their own threshold for tolerating different side effects. Some weight gain might not bother one person while it's a deal-breaker for others. For example, if a drug was going to diminish my libido, then I just wasn't going to deal with that, he says. Among the drugs I haven't taken are some I haven't taken for that reason.